Tekken, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, The King of Fighters, Dead or Alive, Guilty Gear. These are just a few of the franchises everyone on the planet knows. But like any form of entertainment, the fighting game genre is no stranger to obscure or hidden gems out there. As I got older, I found out that there are a ton of hidden gems in the fighting game genre. Some are great, some are bad, and others look like they have potential to change fighting games forever. Well, for this episode, I'm going to show you a fighter that was incomplete and how it would have changed fighting games forever. Welcome, fighting game enthusiasts, to a series called
No mercy. Attack.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of AnimeWarlord's Total Knockout. This is a series on the channel that is going to be focused on talking about or reviewing obscure or hidden gem fighting games that are out there, because there are a ton of hidden gem fighters out there. So for my premiere episode, I thought long and hard of what I wanted to review, and I just basically said to myself, hey, why not start this series off by reviewing the GOAT of all fighting games, and that is Daraku Tenshi, The Fallen Angels. So, Daraku Tenshi, The Fallen Angels was going to be an arcade game that was going to be released in March of 1998. I believe they released the game 1 month prior, but it was incomplete. And people who have actually played the incomplete version of the game actually thought it was amazing. So Saikyo pulled it back into development, and then unfortunately they abandoned the game entirely, and unfortunately Daraku Tenshi, The Fallen Angels is still incomplete today. And this had all the potential to change fighting games forever. But why did it have the potential to change fighting games forever? And why do I call it the GOAT of all fighting games? Well, in this episode, you're going to find out exactly why. Starting with, how was it made? The fighting game genre began to boom in the 90s. In 1997, Namco enjoyed the release of the third Tekken game in their franchise. Street Fighter had also released their third game in their franchise that same year. Meanwhile, in Osaka, Japan, SNK were pumping out banger after banger. The King of Fighters 98 was released, and it was a worldwide success, after completing the Orochi saga the previous year. So what about Saikyo? Ever heard of them? I doubt it. Saikyo was a Japanese company that developed mostly shoot-em-ups, or shmups. Not wanting to miss out on the fighting game boom, their first attempt was in 1994. Enter Battle K Road. Now, despite the sprites looking like Hollywood actors and actresses, the game saw some mild success in Japan, but it still kind of failed nonetheless. Then, 4 years later, in 1998, teaming up with various SNK devs, they were working on a game called Daraku Tenshi, or The Fallen Angels translated into English. However, the world wouldn't get a chance to see the game for themselves. Rushing to meet a deadline, they released the game incomplete, and they pulled it back into development before abandoning the game entirely, and it remains incomplete to this very day. But how the hell are we able to play this game? Well, how we are able to play it, it's because of the amazing power of video game emulation and a passionate fighting game community saving it from becoming lost media. Daraku Tenshi's fate is a solemn reminder of how hellish game development can be. Daraku Tenshi had 8 playable characters, a sub-boss, and 1 final boss. The looks of Daraku Tenshi are fantastic. It just oozes style, and it screams SNK all up in your face. The sprites of the game are 2D, but the backgrounds in which the characters fight on are realistic. It was clear that Saikyo wanted to make a game that just oozed style and was grounded in realism. Why else, other than a deadline, was the game close before being fully completed, we may never know. Other than realistic backgrounds with 2D character sprites, small details also shine. Like the feathers that fall off Cool when he does his flash kick, or flies buzzing around Onigawara, symbolizing how smelly he is. As I mentioned in the introduction, this was going to change fighting games forever, being the first of its kind, a fighting game with a story that included cutscenes, different endings for the characters, and so much more. Here's a brief rundown of what the story is about. The game takes place in the year 2010, 10 years after a massive earthquake shook the core of a computer-controlled city that had been surviving on a thin layer of peace built by information control. With their control now destroyed and the landmass their city sat on cut off from the mainland, the inhabitants of the city began war with each other for the useless vestiges of power that remained. With the city in complete disarray, sex, crime, and drugs began to take over as the city decayed from within. In a twisted sense of irony, what's left of the city had been renamed Eden, the last paradise. Now, due to this game being incomplete, it's nearly impossible to get a full idea of what this game's story was going to be. However, we can piece together some of the game's story due to the characters that make up the game's roster. Speaking of the characters, that's our next discussion. Let's start off with the first character we see in the roster, Cool. Cool is a 24-year-old thief who is well known in the criminal underworld of Eden. He is also known as the Black Wings of the 4th Sector. He dislikes honeyed words like hopes and dreams. Cool has a calm demeanor, but will react violently when his freedom is threatened. During the events of the Fallen Angels, a man named Carlos infringes on Cool's territory, and Cool sets off into Eden to find him and get revenge. When a match with Cool starts, we see him in a jail cell, and I've read somewhere that Carlos was the one who put him in there, and how he got out is a mystery. However, a likely candidate could be Taro, since he's kind-hearted and he didn't want to see him rot away in the prison of Eden. Cool is a man who is known to have trust issues as well.
Hi.
Our next character is Harry Ness, a 34-year-old captain who was serving in the United States Marine Corps and is sent into Eden by the president to try and quell the situation. He also has a wife and daughter, but due to him being a workaholic, it has created a rift between them. Harry now lives apart from them. Even though he is a captain, Harry is also a big otaku for anime. That fact about him can be found in the game files.
Battle.
The third character we see in the roster is Taro. Taro, to put it simply, is your token green strange-looking character that 90s fighters were dictated to have. However, there is very little to not much known about him. He is also known as Taro the Tender-Hearted Android, and the fact he may have been created by Carlos and that he wishes to be human. About 15 years ago, Taro was picked up by an old man by the name of Matthew. In fact, Matthew was actually the one who gave him the name Taro. Taro is hated in the criminal underworld of Eden, and that's due to his strange appearance. But, as mentioned before, Taro is actually a gentle giant who loves nature and animals. That's why we see a cat with Taro before his matches begin.
Yuriden. Yuriden.
Yurien and Yuriran are 20-year-old twins that own a restaurant and bar called Kaze no Sakana, or the Windfish. Yurien is a singer and cross-dresser. In fact, he's known as Yurien the Attractive Diva despite being male. Yurien's singing voice is so beautiful it draws patrons into their bar. Yurien also acts as a bodyguard too. Even though he is friendly and delicate, he's actually quite strong. Yurian, his twin sister, is a bartender. Despite owning a bar alongside her brother, the two do not get along. She also acts as a bodyguard too. The main reason the two squabble often is because he wants his sister to act more like a lady, which she greatly resents. And seeing their introduction when they interact with one another before the match begins, it's honestly kind of funny.
Round 1. Fight.
Ruchio Roche is a 16-year-old assassin in Eden's criminal underworld. He is so well known that they gave him the nickname the Crouching Dragon of the Underworld. As a child, he was found by Wan Taizen, the underworld boss who developed Roche's skills at becoming a killer. By age 14, Roche had escaped from Wan Taizen, and for the last 2 years, he now works as a freelance hitman. Even though he may have escaped Wan Taizen, he thought he had freedom, but he thought wrong. Because of his EOF, or End of Files, Roche's life is under constant threat from Wan Taizen.
Onigawara!
Terao Onigawara is a 47-year-old martial artist who lives and breathes karate even after becoming homeless. Believing he's the strongest fighter on Earth, he maintains discipline night and day, and that becomes his sole reason for living. In the past, he once taught martial arts to soldiers, even training a young Harry Ness.
バカですが、目を覚まさせてやる。では、本気でいきますよ。ラウンド1、ファイト。
Haiji Mibu, my favorite character in the roster, is a young man who has a storied past with Carlos. Haiji was also known as the 8th Mad Dog. Haiji was one of 7 children that were created in a project called Case Class, aka the Ash Children. After being forced to fight to the death, Haiji ended up being the sole survivor after killing the rest of the human weapons. After escaping from Carlos, he now serves as a bouncer and bodyguard for a brothel. He is likely known as the Mad Dog because of his tendency to snap if you call him number 8, his designation at Case Class. Although not mentioned in the game files, it can be assumed that he has deep trauma associated with Case Class. The main villain of the game is Carlos, who is an infamous crime boss and an elite hacker. Prior to the events of the game, Carlos had hacked into the CIA's database, which resulted in Harry Ness being deployed into Eden. He is also a man with a split personality too. In normal circumstances, he conducts himself in a gentlemanly fashion, but he can instantly snap into becoming a madman who won't hesitate to kill his own subordinates. As a real estate tycoon, he has come to dominate the city of Eden with his influence at the age of 29. Yet, the power remains unsatisfied and is making his plans to control the economy as well. Carlos is joined by Trigger, the sub-boss of the game who is hired by Carlos to serve as his personal bodyguard. Lately, there has been a rabble in the city causing trouble and commissioned Trigger to take them out. He's also a man who is proud of his gunfighting ability and treasures his weapons above all else. Those are all pretty much the 8 playable characters in emulated versions of the Fallen Angels, and you can play as Carlos and Trigger yourself by using MAME cheats. Looking through the game's files, there were 4 other characters that were unfortunately scrapped. Their names are Snake, Sid, Lapis, and Jimmy. So, what happened to Psycho after they closed the Fallen Angels? Well, they carried on for a few more years, and finally they went fully defunct in 2002. However, those who worked on Daraku Tenshi went their separate ways. Some formed their own company, while others went to work for SNK yet again. And thus, KOF 99 was born. The King of Fighters 99 was released a year after Daraku Tenshi was supposed to be released. Looking at the roster, it's crystal clear that some characters in the roster were inspired by the rosters of the characters that were in the Fallen Angels. Haiji Mibu and Cool were the 2 main influences for the designs of characters K-Dash and Chrysalid. Harry Ness is a direct inspiration for the character Maxima. Lapis, the scrapped character found in the game files, is seen with a whip around her pants, and that was the inspiration for KOF 99's whip. If you thought that Cool and Haiji Mibu being the 2 influences for K-Dash and Chrysalid was awesome, wait until you hear this fun fact. Have you heard of Chrysalid's boss theme? It's a banger, absolutely. But the name of it is interesting once you learn of this game's existence. What's the name, you ask? The name of it is called Dear Fallen Angel. A mere coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe it's a solemn salute to the game that never was. An ode to a game that never got the chance to see the light of day. Or did it? Which is why our next discussion is... Thanks to various other YouTubers covering this game, Mugen Engines, other fighting game enthusiasts, and doing research on the game itself, The Fallen Angels has been getting a huge cult following. Once you discover the existence of Daraku Tenshi, you just can't get enough of it. I discovered this game at the legendary Galloping Ghost arcade, and when I played it, I was instantly hooked due to the realistic backgrounds, the incredible character sprites, the soundtrack, and so much more. I remember playing it the day I discovered it. I remember saying, I love fighting games, but this one looks incomplete. The owner of Galloping Ghost Arcade and my dear friend Doc Mack heard me say that, and he said that's because it is. He then proceeded to educate me on the game's history and why it was never complete, and Psycho had the fate that it did. And needless to say, I was amazed. To this very day, Daraku Tenshi remains my favorite game of all time. In 2019, the unthinkable had happened. Japanese team Zero Div announced they were working on a complete edition of Daraku Tenshi for arcades and consoles in 2020. They promised to include the 4 scrapped characters, make numerous adjustments to the story, and so on. It was a dream come true for fighting game fans. But then COVID-19 shook the world, and we never got an update from Zero Div ever since. Why that is unclear, but one theory is that they had left the game behind, as Psycho did back in 1998. Fast forward to 2024, I hear about a website called X Arcadia, and they are working on a game called The Fallen Angels Revenge. They may include the 4 scrapped characters, make adjustments to the unfinished story, and so on. When this will be released, no one knows, but for now, this is a project they are working hard on. If you want more info on The Fallen Angels Revenge, I left a link to it down in the description box below. Daraku Tenshi is a lot of fun, and it's definitely worth checking out. If you want to play it yourself, find yourself an emulator that has a port of the game, or head down to the largest arcade in the world, Galloping Ghost in Brookfield, Illinois. Even though this game is incomplete, don't let that dissuade you from how much of a beautiful piece of fighting game history is right in front of you. I hope The Fallen Angels Revenge comes more sooner than later, but hey, good things happen for those who wait.